President Buhari is hale and healthy, says acting president Yemi Osinbajo.
The president is hale and hearty. I spoke to him and we had a fairly long conversation. He was, of course, interested in knowing about the process, the budget process, and how far we had gone.
Federal government policies and programs take center stage as 7 ministers interact with Nigerians at town hall meeting.
The Nigerian and European Union Parliament collaborate to enhance democracy and good governance.
And no work, no pay policy in focus today on Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, I'm sure it is no longer news to everyone that some civil servants in different parts of the country, indeed in the 36 states of the Federation, owed salary arrears of several months running.
That's right, Claire. Now, this is even after the federal government granted bailout funds to a number of the states that were indebted to enable them resolve the issue of salary arrears. As you just indicated, civil servants are still being owed in a number of states, several months of their salaries.
Indeed, Kingsley. But of course, the situation represents the, the scenario in most states, and it has helped, labor, to enforce labor strike, or of course, a threat, by civil servants. Again, we have different unions, threatening to go on strike, such as the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU. We have, of course, medical practitioners in public institutions and medical workers, and so on and so forth, all, of course, threatening to go on, of course, embark on industrial strike for lack of salaries or unpaid salaries.
Or otherwise, the non-fulfillment of agreements that were entered into previously. That's in the case of the Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics. Now, to ward off, that's right, to ward off such developments of either a threat of industrial action or actual industrial action, governments at the federal and state levels, continue also to threaten to invoke Section 43 of the Trade Dispute Act. Of course, that act is to be found in the laws of the Federation of Nigeria, and it relates to the policy of no work, no pay.
All right. In fact, this much was alluded to recently by the Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, and that's following the warning strike by Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics, ASUP. He stated thus, and I want to quote him now, "I wish to remind the trade unions that there is nothing like a warning strike," unquote, in a national industrial relations system. And Kingsley, the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, in reaction, frowned at the minister's position and raised the issue of a two-side obligation. Now, as a result, NLC is reported to have directed all its state branches where salary liabilities of up to 3 months exist to enforce a no pay, no work policy.
That's right. Now, as this development obviously points to a possible breakdown in industrial relations between the government and labor, what really is the spirit of the legal provision regarding no work, no pay? And on the other hand, how does it also play out with what we are hearing now of no pay, no work has been canvassed by workers?
All right. Now, how best could labor-government relations be strengthened to enhance productivity and, of course, check loss of man-hours? We'll have answers, as usual, and they'll be provided by the experts we shall be engaging in the studio in a short while. And of course, we would like other Nigerians, of course, those of you watching, to join in our conversation. Our Twitter handle, again, just to remind you, is at NTAGMN, at NTAGMN. And once again, we're looking at the work policy, no work, no pay. On that note, I'll welcome you to another edition of the program, Good Morning Nigeria. It's live here on the NTA in Abuja. I am Claire Adilabu Abdul Razak.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Claire in also welcoming you to the edition of the program, which is reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network. In the course of the program, We shall, of course, bring you our regular complimentary segments, including business, newspaper review, sports, foreign, and others. In the meantime, we're going over to the newsroom, and as usual, again this morning, we have with us Anne Jibuno. Hi, Anne.
Hello, Kingsley and Claire. Good morning. Good morning. Here's the news. President Muhammadu Buhari is hale and hearty, says acting President Yemi Osinbajo. The acting president told State House correspondents that there was nothing to worry about the president's state of health.
Conversation. He was, of course, interested in knowing about the process, the budget process, and how far we had gone. And as you know, we had a meeting with the private sector on the economic recovery and growth plan, and he was also interested in knowing what was happening with that, with the economic recovery and growth plan, and what we were doing with the private sector. You know, and of course informed him about some of what we have seen, the protest marches and all of that, and you know some of what the feedback of what people are saying about the economy and all of that. So he's in good shape. We are very chatty, and we had a conversation.
In the meantime, acting President Yemi Osinbajo has responded to some Nigerians who are protesting the economic situation in the country. The acting president gave the response at the consultative forum between the economic management team and the private sector on the economic recovery growth plan in Abuja.
But I'd like to say to every Nigerian that we hear you loud and clear. The government is one that is determined to give the ordinary man a fair deal. You have the right to live well and decently, and we are committed to making that happen. But years of deterioration and corruption cannot be remedied overnight. But again, I must emphasize that it is our business and our duty to ensure that we put the Nigerian economy on a path of sustained growth, and that is exactly what we're determined to do.
Bajo also noted that the journey out of the damage caused by years of neglect and corruption is bound to be difficult, but there is a glorious light at the end of the tunnel. The federal government has continued its consultative meetings with various stakeholders for their contributions to a planned economic recovery and growth program for the country to run from 2017 to 2020. Acting President Yemi Osinbajo at a meeting with investors in Abuja says the federal government considers private sector participation in the economy as crucial to achieving its planned program, especially in taking the country out of recession.
It is fundamental to the way that we intend to do business that we work with the private sector. There's no question at all that the federal government on its own, or any government on its own, can simply not effect economic policy in a country whose economy is as large as ours. Indeed, most of what will be done by the private sector, and it's our business to create the environment to ensure that the private sector thrives.
7 cabinet ministers interact with Nigerians as the federal government's town hall meeting moved to Ilorin North Central Zone, where they explained the policies and programs towards achieving a more prosperous nation. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, believes the federal government will achieve more for the nation with better support from the media and Nigerians.
Bridging the communication gap between the government and the people, carrying the people along in the process of governance, and also getting the much needed feedback from the people.
Negotiation with GE, and we believe that between the first quarter and the second quarter, we would have concluded the negotiation, and you will see more activities on the train. That one, once we conclude, we will create employment.
Meanwhile, the Kwara State Governor, Abdul Fattah Ahmed, has commended the federal government's efforts at ensuring people's participation in governance for inclusive development. The governor stated this while receiving some ministers led by the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, at the Government House, Ilorin.
It's part of what we do on a monthly basis here in the state. We have a platform where we meet with our people, we exchange information on what government is doing and get to hear from them. So coming in from the federal level to hold a regional one here is a very welcome development.
The whole idea of the cloud meeting is to provide a platform for the government and the government to interact.
The Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, has appeared before the Joint Committee on Power of the National Assembly to explain the sudden change in leadership at the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN. The minister's appearance followed what the security described as disturbing information regarding the TCN.
TCN does not have a managing director. The person on whose behalf on whose behalf a petition has agitated this house is not a managing director.
The National Assembly, represented here by the Joint Committee on Power, is not in any way interested in dictating to you how you run your ministry and the parastatals that are therein.
In the meantime, the federal government says it is not in competition with state governments, but would want to establish a partnership and collaboration that works with them to move the country forward. The Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, stated this in Abakaliki while exchanging views with Ebonyi State Governor Dave Umahi. The European Union Parliament has selected Nigeria as one of only 7 countries in the world to collaborate with its efforts to enhance democracy and good governance. This came to the fore when the Speaker, House of Representatives Yakubu Dogara, received the Democracy Support and Election Coordinating Group in Abuja.
For instance, human rights and parliament, gender equality and the role of parliament, role of political parties, role of parliament in conflict prevention and mediation, and relationship with civil society and citizens.
It is in this line that we have even set up parliamentary friendship groups in the House of Representatives specifically. We have those groups that will relate with different parliaments of different countries, and they've kick-started work in earnest. We hope to build on that to be able to garner the best practices in other regions so that we can improve on our own practices.
The NTA Television College is to come up with courses designed to train children of internally displaced persons in the production of programs with local content relevant to their needs. Director General of the NTA, Yakubu Ibn Mohammed, stated this during discussions with Governor Kashim Shettima of Borno State.
The zonal arrangement was conceptualized. NTA was fulfilling thus running the best zonal center in the country. And we intend that NTA should reposition itself back to its position of eminence.
This is the right time to give the requisite, the required publicity to our modest efforts in settling our people and for them regaining back their dignity. No matter what, living in the IDP camp is not the best of options for the majority of our people.
Well, that's the news for now. Claire and Kingsley will be back after this break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words. Run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt. But remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Why are you filming, Mommy? To help people stop getting sick. People think it's the ever-changing weather during Harmattan that makes them sick. Actually, it's the germs. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs, including flu.
Dettol, endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association.
The federal government's social investment program has begun. The poorest and most vulnerable in the land get 5,000 naira monthly, and phase 1 has started in 9 states of the federation. 200,000 unemployed graduates have been engaged in the N-Power Volunteer Corps, designed to engage 500,000 people. 5.5 million children will be fed regularly in the homegrown school feeding program, which kicked off in 3 states last year, with 9 more to be added this year. And under the Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program, GEEP, thousands of cooperatives, market women, farmers, and enterprising youth have been receiving between 10,000 and 100,000 naira soft loans since November 2016. The Social Investment Program has begun. It can only get better. We promise change. Change is here.
Right, let's start off our conversation this morning with the business news. And in our package this morning, experts converge on Lagos to brainstorm on the investment potentials in Nigerian foods. And we also have a report on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, which begins the week in the red. Leah Katumba Batumbe tells us more.
International experts and policy makers in food safety have arrived in Nigeria for the first Nigeria Food Safety and Investment Forum built to hold in Lagos. Top on the agenda is an expo on internationally acceptable quality in food handling and processing and the use of technology and its application to enhance Nigeria's food export. It will also look at new possibilities for investment in capacity building in food safety and regulatory systems. The summit, which is jointly organized by the United Nations Quality Infrastructure Project, the European Union and global agencies, is leveraging on Nigeria's abundant opportunities in food investment.
This is where the investment comes. It is safetiness, it is health, it is potential for business. This is what also the government of Nigeria is asking. It is to diversify the economy.
Latest data from the United States Department of Agriculture Economic Research Service puts global food retail sales at about $4 trillion annually. As an industry driven by innovation and competition, food manufacturers are focusing on specific product lines where this has inherent advantage.
Basically, safety will improve the policies of Nigeria. This will improve the investment in Nigeria with respect to the food items, and this will improve the overall technology that we are being used in Nigeria, because these are the elements due to which EU has banned some of the items. As you know, EU has banned.
The Food and Agriculture Organization FAO reports that Nigeria loses $10 billion in annual export opportunity of food. Oil steadied near $57 a barrel on Monday as OPEC supply cuts and rising tension between the United States and Iran were countered by ample inventories and signs that higher prices will revive U.S. output. The Trump administration's new sanctions against Iran, though not affecting oil outputs, raised concerns about the potential for further developments that could hinder export growth in OPEC's third largest producer. Despite the OPEC cuts, U.S. crude inventory rose by more than expected last week. Let's take a look at closing figures from the NSE. And that is Business News for this hour. Thank you for watching.
All right, thank you very much, dear Leah Katumba Batunde, for the business news. Next now for us is a look at the headlines in some of today's papers.
And Bayo Atoyebe, the pleasure is always ours to have you join us.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, also I welcome you to this review section.
Thank you.
For Tuesday. Now, there are a number of stories we have on the front pages of the paper, stories which are trending, and then also stories that are exclusive to a couple of the papers. Let's begin our review with the Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard newspaper, we see the lead story there, just above. Okay, let's begin from the stories above the nameplate. It says NLC, TUC to launch mass action against defaulting states. That's salaries and pensions. And then next to that, you have another story. Ambode vows to remove Danfo from Lagos roads. And Buhari's health, I'm not under pressure to resign. That's according to the acting president, Oshibajo. Says only president can disclose his health status. Now, below the nameplate, you have the lead story, a double-decker headline, anti- and pro-government rallies in Abuja, Lagos, Benin, London, and Ibadan. And there are two riders to that. We hear you loud and clear, says acting president Oshibajo. And federal government cautions religious leaders against inciting comments. Now, you see the photographs there on the front page from the various cities where there were rallies. And then, of course, you have other stories there on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. Claire.
All right, Kingsley, and the paper I have today, or the papers I have, all carrying similar stories. But let me begin with the blueprint. And the blueprint has, beginning just below the nameplate, Atiku Kwankwaso's loyalists intensify meeting on Buhari. And we also have there, pray for him, that's coming from Can. You can read up these details on page 6. Now, the lead story on the front page, Nigerians defy police, protest hardship, and it coming with two riders. We understand your grievances, FG, and APC didn't promise change in 1 year. That's coming from Amechi. And the picture stories, of course, if you read, the placards tell the story. Members of the Coalition for Good Governance and Change Initiatives protest in support of federal government's policies in Abuja yesterday. And you can read from the placard there, Coalition for Good Governance, we believe in President Muhammadu Buhari and all, of course, some of the works that has been done. And on the other side, you find members of the One Voice Nigeria join a peaceful protest on high cost of living in the country. And that event took place in Lagos also yesterday. Other stories, NLC, TUC held Good Governance Rally Thursday. Details of that on page 13. And Niger police arrest 195 rustlers, rescue 21 villagers, and 612 cattle. Details of that again on page 14. Now, fresh bid to unseat Tambuwal begins on page 5. I left UK voluntarily, Ibori, page 9. And at last, SGF appears, defense budget at Senate, page 5. Buhari, hail and healthy, that's coming from acting President Oshibajo. And that's the outlook of the blueprint. Bayo, you're smiling.
Yes. Well, the talk of the nation was the protest yesterday. Protesters gathered in some cities around the country. Members of civil society groups and celebrities protested in Lagos and Abuja. Daily Trust reports that although innocent Dibia had pulled out, placard-carrying protesters were seen in several cities. The cities that are identified are Lagos, Abuja, Ibadan, Benin City, and Ijebu-Ode. Nigerians were said to have also demonstrated to the High Commission in London. Some of the placards they carried showed Buhari, is this the change you promised us? Nigeria, change has become chain. We are graduates and no jobs. Rice now 17,000, kerosene 350. In Abuja, there were two groups, one opposing the protest, the other supporting it. One was One Voice Nigeria, the other group, I Stand With Nigeria, while the other group had a hashtag, We Stand With Buhari. Those in support of the Buhari administration says that they have on the success of defeating Boko Haram and fighting corruption. And they said that Nigeria was like a virus-infested system. It needed a shutdown and total reformatting. The acting president, vice president and acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, said, federal government, hear all of you loud and clear. Federal government is determined to give the ordinary men a fair deal. He says Nigerians have a right to live well and decently too, and the federal government is committed to making that happen. President Muhammadu Buhari, he says, is concerned about the lot of the common man. He says this is years of deterioration cannot be reversed overnight. He also mentioned that I spoke with the president. The president is hale and hearty. I spoke with him this afternoon. We had a warm conversation. He wanted to know about the budget, and I also briefed him about the protest. So the president, while still waiting for his test result, is already aware about the protest. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Labour Congress has also reacted. They have cautioned against negative remarks on the president's health. President NLC Ayuba Waba says there is no need for any speculation on the president's health. He says, we are all human, people can fall ill, it is not an issue to contest. All we have to do is pray for the quick recovery of the president. Meanwhile, one paper, The Authority, reports that the senior special assistant to the president, Garba Shehu, says that I had a conversation, I spoke with the president's personal doctor last night. He told me the President Buhari is not in any serious condition to worry about. He is not in a hospital. He is in the residence at the High Commission. They were set and with the delegation to depart, but there was need to delay for some tests. And immediately the tests are over, the president will return.
All right, Bayo, as we indicated, the stories are also common to the front pages of Daily Trust as well as New Telegraph. The story on acting from Daily Trust, for instance, the story on acting the president as well as the protests in a number of cities across the country. So we'll just keep those headlines and then go to the foot of the front page of Daily Trust, where we take 4 other headlines. Truck kills 11 motorcyclists in Abuja. Details of the story can be found on page 8. This was said to have taken place somewhere around Dutse Alaji on the outskirts of Abuja. That's a truck kills 11 motorcyclists in Abuja. And then Abuja-Kaduna train fares rise by 50%. Details of that story can be found on page 13. But just to indicate that the 50% probably you will need to work out your own math because this is the way the increase has this is the way the increase is. Executive class ticket now will go for 1,500 naira one way as against 900 naira. That's obviously more than 50%. And also the standard class has moved from 600 naira to 1,050 naira. Again, that's also more than 50%. So Abuja train fares rise. Details of that story can be found on page 13 of Daily Trust. Now, 2018 census. NPC, that's the Population Commission, to spend 60 billion naira on ICT. That's to be found in greater detail on page 6. And non-performing bank loans rise to 11.7%. That's according to the economic outlook published by GTB, that's Guaranteed Trust Bank. Again, details of that story can be found inside at page 13. And let me very quickly take other headlines from the New Telegraph. The lead story, of course, also it's on President Buhari, his health status, as well as the demonstrations you can see. So above the nameplate of New Telegraph says, federal government to Nigerians prevail on senators to approve $30 billion loan. And reps fought CBN and IOCs on sale of Forex to marketers. Now, below that, below the nameplate, you have a window of other headlines. Kidnappers free birthday girl and 2 friends. That's on page 9. And CBN to sanction banks over non-remittance of payments. No plan to Islamize Nigeria, says federal government. That's on page 7. And Amechi didn't utilize available resources. That's according to Wike, who is incumbent governor of Rivers. Glenn.
All right, and quickly a look at the front page of The Authority, and has a splash of stories. Of course, the lead story I'd like to take is this one. Corruption. Nigerian stock exchange stinks. And it comes with 2 riders. Stockbrokers defraud investor 10 billion naira, and SEC intervenes as investors' confidence wins. That's the lead story. And of course, you had the picture story of the protesters. We've talked about that. It's been carried in all the papers we are, of course, reviewing this morning. And to take you a bit above the nameplate, Buhari or Shibajo APC hold closed door meeting. It's on page 4. And federal government to buy new vehicles for Shagari, Obasanjo, IBB, Jonathan, and others. Now, Amuneke, that's in sports. Eagles must be prepared to stop Cameroon. Well, that's the front page of The Authority. But there's a story on the inside page, if I will quickly get to it now. But of course, it's talking about the pro-Buhari group calling on, the government to increase the stipend, the 5,000 naira stipend to
the vulnerable.
Yes, vulnerable to 10,000 naira.
Well, let's look at the 2 stories now. There was a pronouncement by the Minister of Transportation that if you prevail on the Senate to approve the 30 billion naira loan proposed by the executive, this is to enable serious pursuance of the infrastructural development. This happened at the Ilorin Town Hall meeting. On that same occasion, the federal government also warned religious leaders against incendiary messages. And this is the concern is about messages of preachings that are likely to cause disaffection, ill will among people that he says can lead the country to war. The Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, says government is worried about comments from religious leaders. In recent times, the media has been awash with statements that seem to designed to pitch one religion against the other. Hear him. Conflicts between Muslims and Christians are fueled by political motivation, ethnic differences, and intolerance and sheer extremism. He says that fallacies of Islamization of Nigeria and persecution of Christians are being peddled around. He said that some have even described the ridiculous assertion that Nigerian military is arming herdsmen to kill Christians. He also adds, some also have labeled Nigeria as the most dangerous place on earth for Christians to live in. He says such fallacies, such hate speech, such peddling of unacceptable language is serving to pitch people against one another. He said no nation has ever survived religious war. This is making, those making these allegations know that it is not true. They are using religion as a tool to demonize government. And he says that government is not going to fold its arms to watch it out. On the same vein, the president of the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, Reverend Dr. Felix Omobude, has called on Nigerians, especially religious leaders, to stop preaching hate. He says religious leaders should desist from making unguarded statements that are capable of causing more crisis. He expressed concern over the manner some influential Nigerians, including religious leaders, political leaders, dabbled into issues that are inimical to national unity and cohesion. He says what is required is for every Nigerian to engage in things that can reduce the challenges that we are facing and these trying times that the nation is in. He says rather than increase the problems, we should join hands in doing things that will bring peace, unity, and development. So those are the express concerns. And quickly, the story that Kingsley read, a truck knocking down motorcyclists in Duse Alaji. We will recall that if you flash back 20 years back, motorcycle was not the means of transportation. It was the necessity and shortage of transportation that led to people using motorcycle as a means of transportation. The latest danger now is in Lagos. Yellow buses are going to go off the street. Again, if you go back 25 years ago, the time I was a student in Lagos, there were scarcely any Danfo. You have LMTS buses all over.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it is a matter of necessity. If you are going to take this massive Danfo out of Lagos, without taking consideration the services they provide and provide an alternative, we are having a possible crisis in our hand.
When you say 25 years ago, it's like 25 years ago is 1992.
Yes. I'm talking about motorcyclists.
No. When you said, motorcyclists, yes, I can understand that. Yeah, but LMTS was available, but Danfo was also there, and Mole was there.
But the majority was the LMTS because it was available everywhere.
Yeah, but you had the Danfo buses, plying the inner city roads and connections. LMTS was usually on the major arterial roads that you had them. But I don't know what they would do in place of the Danfo buses. They had become, Danfo was Volkswagen buses.
Yes.
Of course, they became even more popular when you had the Volkswagen assembly plant in Lagos.
Nigeria.
Yes, they were turning them off
That
the line.
story, gentlemen, is on page 8 of what paper is this now? Blueprint. Lagos to ban yellow commercial buses on board. And I'm trying to see if I can find anywhere, of course, where it said what it's going to do. Well, he said the government was also embarking on massive reform. Okay, that's racist. But basically, he said there was still a lot more to be achieved as regards making Lagos one of the vibrant cities of the world. And that it is estimated that 86 immigrants enter Lagos every hour. The highest in any city, and they have no plans to leave. So, is it the yellow commercial bus?
You see, the necessity.
No, but there was earlier a report of phasing out Molwe. Because Molwe had virtually outlived its usefulness, environmental pollution arising from diesel that they consume, the diesel that they use, and then the buses, of course, were rickety. And it was the fall of Molwe that actually gave rise to the plenitude, if you like, of minibuses. Minibuses. But Danfo, had always been around. And they always have this altercation between men in uniform who refer to themselves as staff, and therefore enjoy free rides. And
they insist on having free rides, yes.
That's right. Okay, Bayo, well, that's the most that we can take for the newspaper review segment today. We hope that, of course, there will be more pleasant news in the course of the day so that tomorrow's review wouldn't be as rather depressing as we have seen. But otherwise, all is well. So see you tomorrow again, right?
Tomorrow will be another day. Thank you for having me as always.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing no work, no pay. That has to do with industrial relations, employer and employee. And then some employees now are also saying, no pay, no work.
call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go to so let the change begin from within. Look at you, Ogerola. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, a subsidiary of the Nigerian Television Authority, specializes in creating comfort in all areas of life, such as real estate investments, that is, land, houses, and office spaces, mass leasing, savings and loan scheme, household items and car loans, and so much more. Other information and entertainment services include Property in Style, a TV program that airs on the network service of the NTA, and also Property Connect, a nationwide magazine. Our priority is to bridge poverty gaps and sustain quality welfare of our clients. Partner with us and watch us help you grow. Pay us a visit today at the NTA headquarters permanent site, Area 11 Garki, Abuja, or our Lagos office at number 15 Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, Lagos. For more information, visit our website on www.ntaproperties.com.ng, or you can email us on ntap2000@yahoo.com. Call us on 080-2316-3474 or 080-6939-5185 or 070-3189-0555. NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, the much needed help at your doorstep.
Right, now let's start off our conversation this morning. A very interesting one it promises to be, and it's a no work, no pay rule. No doubt remains very contentious in government-labor relations here in Nigeria. But the most frequently asked question is whether or not the policy is capable of curbing labor unrest in the nation's public sector. To tell us more about this report, to start our conversation, let's join Timothy Yusuf.
Strike arises out of labor dispute between the employer and the employee. It relates to cessation of work by a body of persons employed by acting in combination of a concerted refusal or a refusal under a common understanding of any number of persons employed to continue to work for an employer in consequence of a dispute. Experts say this is done as a means of compelling their employer or any other person or body of persons employed, or to aid other workers or body of persons employed to accept or not accept terms of employment and physical conditions of work. Going by this definition, the employer-employee relationship is built on the concept that an employee agrees to provide his or her service to the employer, in return of which the employer agrees to compensate the employee with money or other forms of compensations or other considerations. As a result, where an employee refuses to work due to absence or dispute with employer or other situations such as lack of work, the employer has no obligation, unless specifically bound by an employment contract, to provide compensation. Hence the concept of no work, no pay. Analysts say the doctrine of no work, no pay is a fundamental saying in labor and industrial relations. They further explained that the philosophy is simply that when a person is employed, it is expected that the work assigned will be carried out, but when this is not done, the employee is not eligible for payment of any salary. Many believe that the principle of no work, no pay is a tool in the hands of employer adopted against employees who absent themselves from work as a result of labor disharmony in the form of strikes. Recent findings in Nigeria reveal that while the organized labor is saying no to the policy, the federal government sees it as a reciprocal action to implement the no work, no pay rule on striking workers. The Minister of Labor and Employment, Chris Ngige, in a recent statement had reminded the trade unions that there is nothing like a warning strike in the nation's national industrial relations system, stressing that a strike is a strike and is subject to all the rules governing strike in the world of work. What then does this disagreement portend for the nation's industrial relationship between government or the employer and employees, as the case may be? Experts on Good Morning Nigeria are set to provide answers and to give more insights into the policy of no work, no pay.
All right, Timothy Yusuf, thank you very much there for that background report. Now we have guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as at our Lagos Network Center. We are still expecting to join us here in Abuja, the Honorable Minister in charge of Labour and Employment, that's Dr. Chris Ngige. But it's not here yet. As we said, we'll look forward to having him join us for this conversation. But in the meantime, let's welcome at this moment the member of the House of Representatives, who also at some point was the General Secretary of NUPEG and also a Deputy President of the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, is Honorable Joseph Akinlaja. Honorable Akinlaja, a pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Okay, and then also joining us from our Lagos Network studios is the Head of Department of Commercial and Industrial Law at the University of Lagos, Professor Joseph Abugu. Professor Abugu, of course, he teaches industrial law, but has a number of publications in this regard. Professor Abugu, a pleasure having you on the program this morning.
Kinsley, good morning. Claire, good morning, everybody.
All right, gentlemen. Claire, just before I think for us to set the stage for this conversation, I mean, we're discussing no work, no pay. That indicates that there's already a breakdown in the relationship between the employer and the employee. But obviously, before there's a breakdown, something would have been going on. Let's examine, first of all, what the state of industrial relations is in Nigeria today. Public and private sectors that has led to this rush of no work, no pay, and we're also hearing that no pay, no work. Let's begin with you, Honorable.
Thank you, Claire, and my brother, good morning. Well, in industrial relation, or let me say industrial relation in Nigeria is a tripartite, like a tripod. We have the private sector, we have the public sector, we have government, the government providing the legal framework under which industrial relations should operate. And then you have the trade union and also the employer, with government supposedly playing the moderating role. But in Nigeria, government is the largest single employer of labor. Therefore, they have dual role, they make the law, they are also employer. At the beginning, things were supposed to be working well. That was why the Labor Act, was enacted, stating the role of the individuals in this tripod, this tripartite relationship. The trade union has its own role, the employer has its own role. The employer provides the work, the workers do the work, and in doing this work, they are expected to be paid. And at a point, I would like to say at the beginning, the employer had the upper hand, especially the sword of Damocles of you employ, you sack, whatever the condition, the workers go ahead. Even before industrial revolution, we had that workers used to work for 16 hours, 18 hours a day, served coffee after 16 hours so that they can continue working without sleep until the strike action in 1886 for 8-hour working week. So this exploitation of workers has been there from time. But the workers now decide to bind themselves together under a trade union to be able to defend their rights. So when the employer knows that this binding together is providing pressure on them, whether government or private sector, it doesn't matter, they decided to formulate this no work, no pay. Because by the time the workers are asking for their right, they have the force to say, if you exploit me too much, I will stop the work. And stopping the work collectively, not individual. We provide pressure to on employer or government, as the case may be, to shift ground in negotiation. I think that's why the no work, no pay comes up to weaken the worker, to prevent him from going on strike. That's the way I see it.
All right, Honorable Akinaja, thank you. Let me go to Lagos, where Professor Abugu. Professor Abugu, you've listened to the labor perspective and interpretation of that doctrine. Let's hear the academic point of view now. First of all, I have a double-barrel question. What is the rationale for the doctrine of no work, no pay? Is it punitive? And secondly, as Kingsley asked, is the status of industrial relation between the employer and the employee today cordial enough to retain that doctrine?
Well, historically, the classical English law position, which we inherited from our colonial masters, is to the effect that a laborer is only worth that amount of wages that he is able to command in negotiations with the employer. In other words, a contract of employment is an individual thing between the worker and the employer. And so, any attempt for workers to combine together to seek to influence terms and conditions of employment was considered an aberration under English law. And so from the early beginnings, workers' combinations by way of industrial action was considered an unlawful interference with the employment relation between the employer and the employee. And so there has been this ongoing struggle between labor and employers as to how terms and conditions of employment, having been initiated in an individual contract of employment, can be improved upon by collective action. It is this struggle that led ultimately to the recognition that workers' combinations should be allowed within a legal framework. And that was what gave vent to the first English statute on trade unionism, the Trade Union Act of 1871. And it was that act that we inherited in Nigeria. We practically took the provisions of that act and enacted them in the Trade Union Act of in the Nigerian Trade Union Act. Okay? Now, what does this law say about workers' combination? The statute, in essence, just like the English one, simply provides a legal framework to allow workers combine together to influence terms and conditions of employment, because it became very certain that workers can no longer be gagged or prevented from coming together in workers' combinations. But by making a framework for them to combine together, the statute also then seeks to regulate how workers can combine and what they can do in the processes of trying to improve terms and conditions of workers' contracts of employment. Now, with respect to the central issue of no work, no pay, it is certainly one of those tools in our labor statutes designed to gag workers and workers' unions from embarking on industrial actions. Now, there are quite a number of other provisions in our statute books that are meant to achieve this effect. Central amongst which is the issue relating to the right to strike. Now, when you talk of the principle of no work, no pay, you have to look at it from two perspectives. From the perspective of the individual employer and employee who are in a singular employment relationship, the effect of the principle is to say that, look, if you don't come to work, you won't get paid for that day. Because contractually, the worker is under a duty to make himself available to do the work he or she has contracted to do. So if you don't do your work, you don't get paid. However, in the realm of industrial relations, the principle of no work, no pay is actually tied to industrial action, strike or other forms of industrial action. And it is to the effect that when workers in concerted action then decide to refuse to perform the duties they have individually assumed in their contracts of employment, Section 43 of the Trade Dispute Act says, in that instance, the worker would not be entitled to wages or other remuneration for the period of such an industrial action. And indeed, for the purposes of computing his period of continuous service, that period will also be deducted. So the worker is supposed to suffer two consequences. Now, for purposes of industrial relation, the effectiveness of the principle of no work, no pay actually does not lie in the black letter provisions of the law, because it lies in the realm of industrial relations when it is arising as the consequence of an industrial dispute. Because of the underlying industrial dispute which gave vent to that action on the part of labor, the underlying dispute can only be resolved through industrial relations. And so usually, it will usually be a condition on the part of the workers that the effect of this rule must be part of the bargaining chip in resolving the underlying dispute. Hence, you find that notwithstanding this provision of the law, its effectiveness or otherwise, whether at the instance of employers or at the instance of the government as an employer, very often, more than not, it is simply a deterrent provision. Its effectiveness, at the end of the day, usually the workers will have their way, because you need to resolve the underlying industrial dispute that gave vent to the strike action.
Professor Abogu, thank you very much there. We'll come back to you to explore this, but I just wanted us again to back up a bit and then talk about just the general industrial atmosphere in the country. We've already now we have the legal background to all legal and historical background to the no work, no pay policy. But what is the industrial atmosphere in Nigeria today, in public and in private sectors? I ask this question because, as we all know, industrial peace is cardinal to production. Honorable Akilaja.
Well, the industrial relation situation in Nigeria is not today. Is not the best. It's not what should happen. There's no worker that will leave his house in the morning to go to work and say, I'm going there to go on strike. Basically, he's going there to work. It is this condition of workplace that will make a worker to decide, I'm going to work or I am not going to work. A situation where a worker gets to work and the condition of work become harsh. It's being exploited in terms of pay. It's being exploited in terms of machine. The tool he used is not the best. It's the type that will cause injury to him, and so on and so forth. Even teachers, lecturers, most of their strikes in the university, the ASU, is that tools of work are not provided. You cannot be effective when you go to work and nothing. So I think basically what is wrong that is beating us the way we are now is lack of proactivity on the side of employer, whether government or private sector. If you allow workers to go on a successful strike before you grant the request, you are indirectly teaching them that they must go on strike before they get anything. I think you understand what I mean.
I understand.
Instead of bringing an issue, or when the worker or his trade union writes a letter for a meeting, let us discuss, and it's ignored, because I came from a tradition at the time that even to recognize trade union was an issue. Just like he said, the combination, to allow for combination is a crime. To form a union at a time was a crime. We used to hold, during Michael Imodu time and H.P. Adebola, we used to hold our trade union meeting in the bush with police set against us to prevent us. So when people now come out from that background, everybody is now with a glove, yes, in their trenches. Now they have combined successfully to the extent that why is it that nobody gets their right as of right? If a person does not get a right as of right, agitation thrives where there is widespread suffering. Is it normal for judges to go on strike before they get, what they should get? Those are the people who interpret the law.
All right. Honorable Akinlaja, again, we will also return to you. Just to go back to Lagos Network Studios. Professor Joseph Abugo, you listen to our guest here in the Abuja studios. What's your take on the industrial mood in the country today across the various sectors? Are we having just a rush of too many disputes, or there's a total breakdown of industrial relationship amongst workers and their employers?
I think that what we are witnessing now is inevitable, the spate of industrial unrest, both in the private sector and in the public sector. In the private sector, where you have an ailing economy, where the level of production is at its most lowest ebb in the history of this country, where the issue of power continues to plague the industries, you cannot but have inefficiency in the productive system. That inefficiency will lead to layoffs, will lead employers to adopt mechanisms that will otherwise shortchange workers. For example, casualization of labor, not wanting to assume full responsibility for the obligations that would otherwise attend a normal employment relationship. These are bound to happen. Retrenchments will then be a common thing. And with the spate of retrenchments, you cannot but see that the labor unions are coming up in arms against employers. They picket banks, they tell them that they cannot retrench. They picket manufacturing concerns and express concerns about retrenchments and all of that. It is therefore a consequence of the economic times in the private sector. In the public sector, again, whilst it is convenient for government to say that there's dwindling economic fortunes, the price of oil is not what it used to be, government revenues are insufficient, yet the Nigerian workers continue to witness the wanton, careless, and sometimes very irritating extravagance that are displayed by those in government. We still have not seen those in the executive or the legislature taking economic measures, for example, reducing their remuneration, reducing their perquisites in office, reducing the numbers of cars in their entourage, reducing the numbers of government parties, of opulence and waste. Yet, the same government then turns back to its workforce to say that there is insufficient revenue to pay workers' salaries. And then they then begin to owe workers 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, sometimes 8 months' salaries. In that situation, it is inevitable that the labor unions will come up in arms to say, this is not acceptable. We will down tools. And so you then see across the sector, whether it is the academic sector, whether it is the medical sector, there is this clamor for government to redress and make a priority the issue of payment of wages to workers. Until there is a change in government attitude and posture, workers will continue to agitate. Industrial action will continue to be a decimal in the public sector because workers who put in their time daily deserve to be paid as and when due. And the Labour Act provides that the interval for the payment of wages should not exceed 1 month. So it is actually a gross infraction of the rights of workers that an employer, be it a private employer, a public, or the government, to owe workers beyond 1 month at any particular point in time. That is the cause of what is going on. Of course, there's also the issue of, the infrastructural decay, which workers at some point or the other would also raise to say, look, apart from just paying wages, the infrastructures for us to do our job are just not there. Until these issues are addressed in the public sector, in my view, the landscape is one that cannot be dotted by industrial actions.
Thank you. Indeed, at this point, let me quickly introduce the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment, who's just joined us, Senator Chris Ngige, also a former governor of Anambra State. Honorable Minister, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you listened to Professor Abugo. He's just said that the industrial relations between the worker or the employer and the employee today, as we have it in Nigeria, is inevitable and will remain so, or is likely to remain so until government changes its actions. But let's, hear your perspective. Do you think the relation is cordial?
Well, I think to a very large extent, if you view the situation in Nigeria today, I think the professor analyzed it properly when he says that it's the socio-economic milieu that has made for the little bumps you're seeing all over the place, the agitations. An economy in recession will always experience the kind of thing we're seeing, even more than we're seeing, because in such an economy now, the workers will be asking for increased pay. Then the employers will also be trying to maximize their profits so that at least they can keep their companies afloat. So there will be a ding-dong, there will be a pool on both sides. And it is for industrial relations managers at that time to know how to strike the balance. That's what we're experiencing now. And so the trust of government is that, number one, for workers, employees in the public sector, we're not going to retrench. That is the cardinal mission of this government. There's no retrenchment in any of the ministries or apparatus or agencies, as you can see. Two, a lot of our investments in terms of workforce earnings revolves around the oil industry and the banking sector, and then manufacturing. So we have done what we can call summits, stakeholder summits in these areas. We held with the oil and gas sector, banking, and we're telling them the message is just simple. We can expand. You can't expand. You can't invest more because of the oil price slide and because of the volume of oil also going down. So you are not earning enough. We are not earning enough as a country. But let us keep the jobs, the ones we have. How do we do that? We do that by you going upstairs and looking at the pecs, remunerations of the executives, those who you fly in private jets, those who go on holidays abroad and 3 times in a year and things like that. Cut from those specs, come down and meet up with the people at the lower stairs. And we told the people at the lower stairs, please don't ask for increase in promotions, trips into the rigs that are not done anymore, and all these other fantastic allowances you get before things are not normal. So we struck a little balance there. And you can see that the retrenchment there is not too big. They listened. But still, you have the rumbles. Banking sector, same. But the banking people didn't listen. They started retrenching. and started retrenching, and they were not even obeying the labor laws of the land. The people come to work and see that their computer have been shut, they have been removed from jobs. Many of the big banks, and they have been declaring profits. So we had to call them back and say you didn't declare redundancy. There is a way to do that. There is a way to do so-called downsizing. The law of redundancy, Section 20, makes it mandatory that you must discuss with the workers. If they have a union, you discuss with their union. If they don't have a union, because most industry don't want their people to unionize so that they're not strong. If you don't have a union, you discuss with individual workers. He's there. And when you discuss, you show them why you are downsizing, which will also mean show you your books. And then from there, you agree on the scope of the redundancy that will be declared. And the law says again, if you are going to remove staff, it will be in the order of last come, first go. So these are the things. So,
Honorable Minister, in addition to what you just said, which has to do with staving off redundancies in the workplace and ensuring that workers, have employment, yes. The cardinal focus of our conversation this morning relates to all of that background which you just mentioned, which the other guests have also touched on. But we are seeing, what we are dealing with is a situation where, fine, there are no redundancies have been declared. Workers are at work, whether in the public or private sectors. They are going to work, but they are not being paid. And then, of course, they have their own agitation, and then they said, okay, fine, we will embark on either a warning strike or, a full-blown strike. And they say, okay, the employer says, listen, no work, no pay. So that's the cardinal focus. And some states now, we are hearing workers saying that if there's no pay, then they won't go to work.
Well, you see, it is really a vicious circle. It is a vicious circle. There's no way, or there's no reason why a workman is not due his pay. The law doesn't permit you to owe workers. 30 days is the maximum days for you to make due with a shortfall. And so, but if the employer breaches that, the worker has a way of asking the employer to pay. You declare a trade dispute. There is an issue. The law captures it. The Industrial Relations Law captures it in section 4.6. You write to your employer, and then you go back, you sit on the negotiation table. When you discuss and you fail, within 7 days of failing, you approach the labor minister. That's what the law says. And when the labor minister gets that case, he is apprehended the dispute. He will bring both parties to the table. And you will get, when you apply, you will say the steps you've taken in the settlement. The minister will look at it and either appoint a conciliator for you, is in the section 6 of the Act, or apprehend and take over the discussions and look at every step and then make peace. If it's somebody who is not paying, he will be able to show us why he's not able to pay. We'll look at the books. We'll look at the books. If we genuinely find out that he cannot pay because of his books, the workers will also see it. And in that case, you now apply this principle of redundancy as in Article 20, which I have already enunciated to you. But for state governments in particular, we do not see why they cannot pay. Government frowns at it. That's why the federal government have continued to give them bailouts and oxygen, so that they can be able to do this. And like somebody said, there's no reason why government should not come down on their expenditure. Frivolous expenditures, travels that are not necessary with big retinue, and so hiring of jets for a state chief executive. So some of these things are things that can be shed off. If you shed them off, you'll be able to pay.
Okay, let me bring the, of course, honorable member here, Joseph Akinlaja, who was also a former deputy president of the NLC.
Yes.
How did the NLC, I would like you to share your experience. What has been the experience of the NLC in trying to resolve trade disputes, of course, with the employer?
Well, the Trade Disputes Act is very clear. It tells the stages from mediation to conciliation to arbitration and out to arbitration. But our experience is that by the time you finish go through the whole hog, you must have been dead, because there will be slow action. They sack a worker, for example, for joining a trade union, form a trade union, and 3 years you are still conciliating. If somebody have a stomach ulcer before he gets food, definitely
At what point does the NLC decide to embark on industrial action?
Yes, at the point that there are issues. There are some issues that cannot wait for the whole hog of mediation, arbitration, and a worker is not paid for 3 months, and he has family, and you say he should go through a process that will take him 1 year. Definitely, we give warning strike. Say, okay, we are warning you for 2 days, so that members of the public will not suffer unduly for the offense they did not commit. So from our experience, the implementation of the Trade Disputes Act has been a harrowing experience for resolution, quick resolution of process. That was our experience.
Honorable Akinlaja, thanks. Professor Abugu, at our Lagos Network Center, there are a number of issues for you to speak to legally. Is the Trade Disputes Act in tatters?
Well, first, I agree with the honorable member that the procedure for the resolution of industrial disputes in the Trade Dispute Act is anachronistic. It is very inhibitive. It does not facilitate quick resolution of disputes. In fact, experience, like the honorable member has said, has shown that it's actually a merry-go-round exercise, that at the end of the day, before you go through mediation, you go through conciliation, you go through the arbitration panel, the tribunal, and then ultimately to the NIC, a lot would have happened. These are not procedures that you finish in 3 months. They are not procedures that you finish even in 1 year. And so it is very, very unhelpful for the resolution of industrial disputes. The trade disputes settlement machinery needs a total legislative overhaul. You see, these are statutes that had their origin in military dictatorships. We have since translated into a democratic system of governance. And all over the world, the right of workers to embark on industrial disputes, to embark on strikes, is actually one of the major indices of a democratic system of government, because it underscores the freedom of the individual to speak, to associate, and to be able to express whatever grievance they have, whether against their employer or against the government of the day. So the statute itself is not helping. And that is why you find that it is a recurrent theme that workers would always, at the end of the day, go on strike.
Thank you. We'll return to you, because I would like to know what aspect of the statute you would want to be overhauled. But that's in a short while. We've got some tweets coming. And, of course, Festus Akimboiwa tweets, no work, no pay equals no pay, no work. He who comes to equity must come with clean hands. The workers deserve their wages and pensions.
And then we have this tweet from Mike Ayankwo, says that's the policy. Should be applied only to workers on disciplinary list and not when a staff participates in a genuine strike by organized labor.
And Sunny Michael or Marco J tweets, even in advanced democracies, workers demonstrate and even go on strike if they are dissatisfied with government policies and programs.
Ernest Oram says the employer should pay the employee first before introducing the no work, no pay rule.
And Festus Akimbo again, no work, no pay policy should be imposed on any members of our National Assembly who regularly fail to attend regular sessions. Okay, that's...
We have this from Ibrahim Tudu. It says, it is better for the government not to start a policy it cannot adequately execute or enforce. Now, workers always work promptly and government pays in arrears.
All right, this one is coming in from Innocent Umobodo. And it tweets, will that curb or cleanse the avalanches and institutionalization of corruption in the system?
And then we have this from Muhammad Jamil Sadara. It says, with the exception of the National Assembly, the other way would have been better for discussion. We have ever-ready workers, but no ever-ready payer.
All right, those are the tweets that have come in. Again, we're discussing no work, no pay policy. Let me again hold Professor Abudu on. Professor Abudu, you talked about overhauling, Abugu, I beg your pardon, you talked about overhauling the statute now. And the part that interests me is the part that calls for reciprocity of responsibilities on the part of the employer and the employee. In cases, as we have at the moment, where so many workers, have gone several months without salaries, is it necessary or will it be, lawful to also invoke the principle of reciprocity? No pay, no work.
On the issue of what sections of the Trade Dispute Act require surgical operation, certainly the provisions running from Section 3 to Section 17 that detailed an elaborate procedure for the resolution of industrial disputes need to be addressed. We do not need the kind of protracted resolution mechanism prescribed by that statute. It is designed as it is to actually gag trade disputes and their resolution. Instead, what I would prefer is a mechanism by which trade disputes can be resolved either at the shop floor level or at the first floor level. The Wages Boards and Industrial Councils Act, for instance, provides a mechanism that requires every undertaking to establish what is called joint industrial councils. And the report of this the collective agreements or resolutions made by these joint industrial councils, again, that's another aberration, requires that the resolutions be filed with the Minister for Labor before they can take effect. But we need that kind of system whereby there are joint industrial councils to resolve and take on industrial disputes at the early stages of the dispute. And so they do not need to be nationwide or industry-wide. That way we can reduce the spate of strikes, and that way we can address disputes whenever they arise timeously without endangering the entire system. So that is one. With respect to the sorry, Claire, I missed the second thing you asked.
Reciprocity of action of in cases where any part of the contract is breached by either the employer, can the principle of reciprocity be invoked?
Again, that is the lopsidedness of the state of our laws against workers. Now, while the statute is clear in Section 43 that no work, no pay, it doesn't explicitly address the issue of where the worker is not paid and yet is obligated to continue to provide service. All the law simply says is that don't owe the worker more than 1 month. But if you do, what happens? Is the worker entitled at that point to say, all right, as it is, I'm damning tools. I can't continue to offer my services on credit? Because really, the truth of it is that the 1 month payment cycle is actually a 1 month credit system. Workers work on credit from day 1 of the month to the 30th or 31st day of the month. So the law says, don't owe him more than 1 month. But if you do, the statute, the existing laws do not empower the worker at that point to down tools. So again, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. So there should be reciprocity. And all of this will have to do with amendment of the extant laws on these issues.
All right, Professor Abugu, thank you very much. Honorable Akinlaja, you've been nodding. Are you likely to take this up as a challenge in the National Assembly? And if so, what else would you be looking at?
Well, definitely we should. I think when circumstance changes, decision must alter. At the time the law was promulgated, nobody envisaged that employer will not pay worker. They only say no work, no pay. But now circumstances have changed. We have to balance it. No pay, no work. So that will be the principle of responsibility.
Can you manage the potential consequences of such reciprocal rights, to be such reciprocal rights to be vested on workers?
Well, it will only discipline both sides. A law cannot discipline only one side and leave the other side, because, like the Honorable Minister rightly observed, maybe it will change our social system. It's only in this country that I see somebody in level 01 and the last person level 17. If we say fingers are not equal, they are very close to each other. Look at it. Not one being too long, it will not cooperate. We went round as NLC to study the social system of other countries. We see wage structure of ratio 1:5. So if there is this law of reciprocity, then the employer will have to do something that will enable him or her to pay, to be able to pay the workers at the end of 30 days or whatever number of days they agree to. Otherwise, you see good for somebody to work for you for 7 months without pay, and you say you should not steal.
All right, Honorable Minister. Now, there are reports that the NLC has issued directive to some of its members in states where salaries are owed. No pay, no work. How does government react?
No, let me correct a wrong impression. Section 43, which the professor is quoting copiously, is not talking about no work, no pay on a normal basis. It's talking about strikes. It's talking about strike. When you call out workers on strike, and let nobody make a mistake about it, the law permits strike. Yes. So it's not really a military law, like he's saying. Yes, this is an act of National Assembly, 2004. I have it here. I can display it. Look at it. It's there. There are 2 of them. The Labor Act, we talked protect the workers, and this is the trade disputes. These 2. The laws of the Federation of Nigeria, 2004, as you can see. So there's no militarism about it. Yes, I agree that some part of it has to be touched, because the time frame is not like going over the hog.
Do you think the part where it provides for no work, no pay?
Yeah, for strikes. He said during the period of strikes. Because there is nothing like one strike. I've said it before, and I continue to say it. A strike is a strike. He will agree with me. And I'm happy he said that overseas and in other climes, the morning strikes are just 2 days, 48 hours, or 1 day. Why is this so? So that the members of the public do not suffer for what they don't know. 2, the unions use their check-off dues to pay their workers at that time. That's why it's warning. But over here, you can do warning strike and say you're doing warning strike for 10 days, for 15 days, even people on essential services, doctors, and they call it warning strike. No, it's not warning strike. It's a strike. So the law in section 43 says that if you withdraw your services during those periods, you don't expect to be paid your remuneration and allowances. And even the period will not count as a pensionable period. The same section 43 is a special provision. Says also that if an employer locks out his workers, because you're talking about strikes when people withdraw their services, there are times when employers also say, don't come into our premises anymore, we don't need you again to work with us unjustly. So such employers, the same laws, section 43, 2, subsection 2 says, you will continue to pay those workers as if they were selling your service.
But if the strike is to call attention to unpaid salaries or condition of service, which is also included in that part of the law.
That is why they said, and he said it, that the process for that is protracted. The law makes provision for that. So if there are areas of laws in that area, they should be retouched. The Nigerian Constitution itself, even in section 17.3,